2013 season is underway as the Magic kick-started their title defence. Romelda Aiken dominated the Jamaican shootout, and one of the game's greats, Sherelle McMahon, made her long-awaited return to the court. As I say hello and welcome to Centre Pass, the official video podcast of the ANZ Championship. Dan Ryan here alongside Kathryn Harby-Williams, former Australian captain, of course. Harbs, a great start to the competition and plenty to be excited about so early on.
Really exciting. It was quite predictable, Dan. I'll just remind you, I'm 5 out of 5 in the tipping contest. You're a paltry 4 out of 5.
Yeah, correct.
But the impressive thing for me was the standard for a round one game. In fact, across the board, the standard was high, the intensity was there, so that sets it up for a really good, tough, competitive season.
Well, let's recap all of the scores from the opening round of the competition. We started things off in Brisbane with a 47-goal haul from Romelda Aiken, saw the Firebirds 9-goal winners over the Southern Steel. The Adelaide Thunderbirds won a tight tussle against the Central Pulse, taking that by 7 goals in the closest game of the round. The reigning premiers, the Magic, thumped the Canterbury Tactics 69-46. The Vixens produced a big fourth quarter to knock off the Mystics by 14 goals, and the New South Wales Swifts opening their account with a dominant display against an out-of-sorts West Coast Fever. As we take a look at the competition ladder, still very early days in the competition, Kath, but Magic sitting in pole position.
Look, the impressive thing about the Magic was that they started off so well. Last season they lost their first 3 or 4 games and then were on a roll and have been since. So I don't know if it's ominous signs or a concern for the Magic that they're peaking early, but you know, the likes of Harby-Williams, generally slow out of the blocks, was impressive, so they'll certainly be right up there at the pointy end of the season. Well,
let's turn our attention to round 2 of the competition as we preview the 5 games coming your way. Kath, starting with the game Saturday in Christchurch, the Canterbury Tactics against the Southern Steel. The bottom 2 teams from last year, both coming off early round 1 losses. Fair to say the strengths of both teams lie in their front lines. It'll be a big test though for the Tactics backline against Janelle Fowler.
Yeah, and that's a test. I mean, you look, they've got Jo Hart and the Tactics have, and she performed very well on the weekend in a losing side. Fowler was outstanding, 44 goals, so she's impressive. I agree with you. I don't think the Tactics have got the backline to counteract her style of play. And you know what you're going to get from the Steel. It's going to be long, high ball from Brown, and the Tactics, unfortunately, will struggle with their personnel.
On Sunday in Perth, it will be the West Coast Fever hosting the Northern Mystics. Both teams coming off 14 goal losses in round 1 respectively. The Fever were well off the pace, Kath, against the New South Wales Swifts. The Mystics good for 3 quarters but fell away in the final 15 against the Vixens.
Yeah, in fact they had similar paths, Dan. The Fever really struggled in that first quarter. The Swifts put 8 goals in a row on them, and you can't afford that. And then they only lost the next 3 quarters by 4 or 5 goals. So, you know, that's not a bad output for the last 3 quarters. The Mystics, yes, impressive, but this game's all about consistency. So I guess the team that delivers in consistency on the weekend will be the team that wins that one.
Another game on Sunday in Melbourne, probably the biggest game of the round. The Melbourne Vixens, runners-up from last year, up against the Adelaide Thunderbirds. Both very impressive in their opening round wins. Such a grudge match between these 2 teams, great rivalries, but Vixens come in with the edge, having beaten the Thunderbirds over the past 2 years.
Yeah, the Thunderbirds, I think the last 4 games have struggled to beat them. And you're right, the intensity is there, the rivalry is there. The South Australians hate the Victorians and vice versa. So we're going to be in for a really good match. In fact, that's the match of the round for me. They need to counteract Sherelle McMahon because she's only going to get better and better. But the Thunderbirds look pretty good, particularly defensively, so I think it's going to be a game of the defensive efforts from both sides.
Well, a big game in New Zealand with the Magic, the defending champions, taking on the New South Wales Swifts. The Swifts looked good against the West Coast Fever. The Magic looked good against the Tactics. A lot of high-quality international players on the court for this one. This should be a cracking game as well.
Yeah, it will be really competitive. It's going to be tough, New Zealand versus Australia. I think it's that sort of rivalry. But let's not get carried away from round 1. Both those sides played lowly teams, so you can read a lot into that and get carried away and get caught up in the hype. The Magic looked really sharp for a round 1 match. The Swifts certainly did as well, but you know, the Magic at home, they've got a really good record there. 83% of their games they win at home, so I think it's going to be all the Magic in that one.
Kath, you spoke last week about Juliana Naopu leaving the Magic and thinking potentially there's a hole in that goal attack position with Ellen Halpenny. How did you assess her first round performance?
Well, she came on the second half, but it was Waitapu who surprised everyone. She played in the first half and was impressive, so I think she's going to be the person that they go to first to try and get some runs on the board before they look at Halpenny, because Halpenny's not quite the mover that the Magic needs. So, you know, Waitapu's filled a hole there. Whether or not she's a great replacement for Naopu, only time will tell, but certainly a serviceable game in round 1.
Final game of the round will be played in Wellington in New Zealand. The Central Pulse hosting the Queensland Firebirds. On paper, this should be an absolute classic of a match as well. The Firebirds 9-goal winners over the Steel. The Pulse very, very competitive against the Thunderbirds, leading by 5 goals, I think it was, in the second quarter. Fell away towards the end, but this should be another really tight tussle.
Yeah, look, it was really hard to pick a winner this round other than the game between the Steel and the Tactics, so it's going to be a close one. The Pulse are the real deal, I think, despite the fact that they lost to the Thunderbirds. The Thunderbirds had to work overtime to counteract their play. They just had a few lapses in concentration, but Donna Wilkins and Liana Leota certainly provided a lot for that Pulse side. The Firebirds, again, they're very obviously Romilda Aitken focused. Medhurst had a serviceable game, so yeah, it's going to be a close one, no doubt about that.
We talk a lot about the Central Pulse being final contenders this year. It's very crucial for them, isn't it, that they win their home games against Australian sides?
Yeah, that's for all teams. I think you've got to win at home to make that top 4. And you look at the Pulse last year, they won 5 games. If you win 8 games in this competition, you're almost guaranteed. If you win 9, you're definitely guaranteed of a top 4 spot. So I think the Pulse are a chance of doing that, but like you said, they have to win at home and they have to beat the Thunderbirds on the weekend.
Certainly looking forward to round 2 of the competition. Harbs, as you mentioned in our opener, you had a great tipping round in round 1. I was a little bit disappointed in getting 4 out of 5, but who are you backing to come home strongest in round 2?
I'm going to milk it, Dan, because I'm hopeless at tipping, and this weekend was really tough. The only one I could decide very quickly on was the Steel over the Tactics. They'll be too strong. Fever and Mystics, it's a tough one there. Mystics don't travel well, but I'm still going to pick them in Perth. Vixens and Thunderbirds, I have to go for my old side. We're a bit biased here, but look, that's going to be a really tight one, but I'll be hoping the Thunderbirds get over the line. Magic and Swifts. Magic at home, because they've got a good, really good record there, and Pulse and Firebirds. I've got to back the Pulse, don't you? You know, someone who you really want to start moving up the ladder.
I like your tips there, Harbs. I'm also backing the Steel, the Mystics, the Thunderbirds over the Vixens the Magic just getting over the line against the Swifts, and the Pulse to defeat the Firebirds at home. So fingers crossed for some tight contests across the board in round 2 of the ANZ Championship. That is all we have time for this week's edition of Centre Pass. Kathryn, once again, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
We look forward to round 2 of the competition. Make sure you check out the ANZ Champs website for all of the broadcast details for round 2 of the competition. We'll catch you next week on Centre Pass.